second to order. Roll call, please.
Anna here.
Sullivan here.
Grillo here.
Lorick here.
David Chair.
Guzikowski here.
Fred with us. Don's going to be gone. He did inform me he would be absent.
Fred is here, but it looks like he's muted.
Okay, Fred, can you unmute, please?
Can you hear me?
Yep,
Okay, I'm here.
thank you. Commissioner Chandler?
Chandler here.
Okay. Before we go on, Carrie, would you please read the notice of video phone conferencing in?
The City of Oak Creek is authorized to hold this public meeting remotely during the COVID-19 public health emergency under the March 16th and March 20th advisories from the Office of Open Government and the Wisconsin Department of Justice. Per the advisories, this meeting being conducted via Zoom video conference with telephone conferencing capabilities was duly noticed per the City of Oak Creek Municipal Code and statutory notice requirements more than 24 hours in advance of the meeting. Members of the public have been advised of the options for participation via direct mailing to property owners within 300 feet of a proposal, via the COVID-19 information page on the city's website, via social media, and via the information contained on the meeting agenda. This meeting may also be viewed at the city's YouTube page, the link for which was contained in all aforementioned notice methods. The meeting recording will also be accessible on the city's YouTube page within 48 hours. Plan commissioners and participants are initially muted upon joining the meeting. Plan commissioners and staff have the ability to mute and unmute their microphones throughout the meeting. Please mute at all times except for roll call, motions, voting, and when recognized by the chair. Roll call and voting will occur per the usual and customary procedure, starting from Plan Commissioner seating positions south to north in the Common Council chambers. The chair will facilitate questions and comments by calling on each Plan Commissioner or by requesting the use of the raise hand function in the Zoom webinar control panel. Only speak once you have been recognized by the chair or moderator. Applicants, their representatives, and all other participants who wish to speak will be unmuted when there is a direct request for information from the Plan Commissioner staff, when the participant utilizes the raise hand function within the Zoom webinar control panel, and the moderator verbally indicates that they are unmuted, when a phone participant dials *9 to indicate that they wish to speak and the moderator verbally indicates that their line is open. When unmuted, all participants must state their name and address for the record, then proceed with comments or questions. Questions and comments may also be entered into the Q&A function within the Zoom webinar control panel. Staff and/or the moderator will monitor this function during the meeting and provide the information requested. There shall be no private messages or side conversations during the meeting utilizing the chat or Q&A functions. Chat and Q&A messages are part of the public record. There is one or more public hearings scheduled as part of this meeting. After the chair announces the public hearing, staff will read the public hearing notice into the record, state that the hearing is open and subject to the meeting procedure previously mentioned, and provide a brief overview of the proposal. The chair will then proceed with the hearing by making calls for public comment. Following the third call for public comment, the chair will close the public hearing and proceed to consideration of the remaining agenda items. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. That will get us to the approval of minutes, and that is the minutes of September 8th, 2020. If everybody please take a look. And when you're satisfied, motion, please.
Seifert moves to approve the minutes of August 25th, 2020.
I believe it would be September 8th, Fred. I think you guys did the 25th on the 8th. It's a typo.
Okay.
Can we amend the motion to September 8th, 2020?
Sure. Seifert amends the motion to September 8th, 2020.
And Guzikowski will second.
Roll call.
Anna, I.
Sullivan, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Lorick, aye.
Kavich abstains.
Guzikowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler abstains.
Common Council actions, item 4, significant Common Council actions. Carrie?
There were none to report this time.
Thank you. Item 5A is our one public hearing of the night. It's for a sign appeal submitted by Landmark Credit Union that would allow the applicant to install a sign on the eastern elevation on the existing building at 8129 South Howell Avenue. Carrie, would you like to read the notice, please?
City of Oak Creek, notice of public hearing before the Plan Commission. This meeting will be held by video phone conference only. Persons wishing to participate in the video conference, including applicants and the representatives, must register via the website prior to the meeting. The video conference will begin at 5:55 p.m. to allow participants to log in. Attendees who wish to participate by phone may do so by calling the City Hall 414-766-7000 before 4 p.m. on the day of the meeting, which is September 22nd, 2020, to obtain a meeting call-in number. Persons who wish to view the meeting live without participating may visit the City of Oak Creek YouTube page at the link provided. Persons requiring other reasonable accommodations may contact the city at 414-766-7000. Requests should be made in as far in advance as possible, preferably a minimum of 48 hours. A public hearing for a sign appeal will be held September 22nd, 2020 at 6 p.m. online via video conference only. The appellant is Dave Pesci, Landmark Credit Union. The tax key number is 813-901-8001. The location is 8129 South Howell Avenue, and the request is a variance from section 170706 I1, which states in part that single and two-tenant office, retail, or manufacturing buildings shall be permitted one wall sign per tenant per street frontage. If granted, the variance would allow the applicant to install one 3.5 by 13 3/4 foot 6 inch by 13 foot 3/4 inch wall sign on the east elevation of the existing building at 8129 South Howell Avenue. The zoning of the property is B4 Highway Business District. All interested persons wishing to be heard are invited to be present. Dated the 2nd day of September 2020. Plan Commission, City of Oak Creek, Wisconsin. Mayor Dan Bukevich, Chairman. This is a public hearing. All those who wish to speak on the matter, please indicate that you wish to speak. When you have been recognized by the chair or moderator, clearly state your name and address for the record, who you are representing, and then please proceed with your comments and questions. This public hearing is now open.
Thank you, Carrie. And as Carrie said, we will make 3 calls. This will be the first call. Kevin, do we have anybody in the waiting space?
Yep, we have Michael DeLugi, the sign manufacturer.
Okay. Would he like to speak now or just wait for questions?
He
I can
has
wait for
a
questions. I can
Okay.
wait for questions.
Thank you. Second call. Anybody wishing to speak, please use the raise your hand function.
Right, nobody raised their hands.
Thank you. And third and final call. Anybody wishing to speak?
All right. Looks like we have Russell. He may be raising his hand for the wrong item, though. Russell,
Okay.
you should be able to speak.
Hello, Russell?
Russell, you have to hit unmute on your computer.
You hear me now?
Yep.
Yes, Russell?
I'm just clicking stuff because I can't find what you're talking about.
I'll let Kevin explain, but I believe there's a raise your hand function, and that alerts us that you'd like to speak.
All I got is my bar on the bottom and nothing else, which is my normal apps that I've got. I can open fast.
If you hover with your mouse right above that, it should then pop up and give you the toolbar. You were hitting the raise hand function, but I think you signed up for item 6F, not 5A.
Absolutely correct.
All right.
Okay, well, we'll consider it a practice run and we'll talk to you at 6A. How's that?
Okay.
Or 6F. Okay, great. I believe that was the third and final call.
That was correct.
Okay, we will now close the public hearing and move on to item 6A, which is consideration of a request for that sign appeal by Landmark Credit Union. We'll open it up to the commissioners for comments, questions, starting on the south end with Commissioner Hannah.
Mr. Mayor, if I could provide a little bit of background
Oh.
before we go into that?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I jumped right over you, Carrie. Pardon
That's all
me.
right. So the request is for one wall sign. It's actually going to be located on the east elevation. There is an existing sign on the west elevation that was approved in 2019 after the wall sign that was on the south tower element that was approved back in 2009 was removed. So they just basically are shifted the sign from the south to the west. And then in consideration of their location on Howell Avenue, they'd like to basically bookend that with the exact same sign on the east elevation. So you'll be able to see it from their, from Howell Avenue and from their entry in that, that common access drive that's in the shopping center. So that is the entire proposal. There is a motion for consideration in the Plan Commission's packet. If you have further questions, I am here to provide any more information that may be necessary. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Now we'll start on south end. Commissioner Hannah.
I have no question. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Sullivan,
I have no comment.
Commissioner Carrillo,
No comment.
Alderman Lorik.
Nothing for me. It looks good. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Guzekowski.
You know what? I think it makes sense. It helps as a wayfinder, especially when you're on Howell Avenue. I'm surprised this hadn't been requested sooner.
Okay. Commissioner Siepert.
I don't see any problems.
Okay. Commissioner Chandler.
Just one question for the applicant.
Go right ahead.
So for this sign, Carrie identified there's another sign close by. Can you share which side or how close the sign is to the other?
Commissioner Chandler, it's on the west elevation. So if you look at the site plan, it's on the opposite end of the building from the proposed east elevation sign.
Thank you.
I have no comments. Kind of agree with Alderman Guzekowski. So, barring nothing, no further questions or discussion, we'll look for motion.
Siebert moves that the Planning Commission approves a sign variance allowing the installation of one 3 feet by 6 inches by 13 feet and 3/4 inches wall sign on the east elevation of the existing building on the property at 8129 South Howell Avenue.
Oracle second.
Roll call.
Anna, aye.
Sullivan, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Lorik, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Siebert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Okay. Thank you very much and good luck with the sign.
Thank you.
Item 6B is a plan review for site, building, and related plans submitted by Croft Hill Laundry Service for an expansion of the south parking area on the property at 9905 South 13th. Carrie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The request is very basic. It is for the addition of 10 truck parking stalls on the south end of the existing property, which is in the red hatch marks on your screen right now. What they'd like to do is have a place for their trucks to park in the winter. They're going to add additional electrical outlets so that they can plug the engines in and kind of keep them up from going cold during the winter months. Those electrical boxes will be at each one of the stalls that's on the south end there. If they are going to be seen, however, the utility boxes for these electrical outlets would have to be screened. There is nothing in the proposed plan that shows a utility box, you know, or a separate transformer or anything for these electrical outlets. If they would be seen from 13th Street, they would have to be screened. There are no other site modifications or any other additions for the building. Due to the location, landscaping is not going to be required for this proposal. So there is a suggested motion that if the Plan Commission is satisfied with the proposal, that they approve with the following conditions, 1 through 3. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Is the applicant with us? Would they like to speak before we go to the commission, Kevin?
Mr. Mayor, we have the civil engineer and the corporate engineer available to answer questions if needed. We
Okay.
did have the neighbor, Michael Faber, who had some questions on it. Mike, if you still have those questions, could you raise your hand? All right, he did not raise his hand, so you guys should be good to continue.
Okay. We'll start with Commissioner Chandler. We'll change it up.
I do have a question for the applicant.
And what's your question, Chauncey?
My question for the applicant is, you've identified 10 additional parking spaces with electrical outlets. Are there any other safety measures that are required for these electrical outlets outside?
Hello, Madam Commissioner. It's Rizal Iskandarsa, RIZAL ISKANDARSJCH. I'm the site civil engineer. These outlets are just like maybe like a 5x5 post, and then they each will have 2 electrical outlet box coming out of it, like a typical outdoor you'll see like in like a residential patio and stuff. So nothing big. And so you'll have like 1 post every 2 stalls because there'll be 2 outlets on each post.
Typically, these are 120 volt outlets, usually 20 amps. Again, as the applicant said, they're usually mounted to a post. They're weatherproof, and then they just plug in an extension cord, which goes to an engine block heater. And just keeps the oil and fluid so it starts in colder weather easier.
Correct.
And you're usually GFCI protected. Well, yeah, our inspectors would take care of the specifics of that. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Siepert?
No, I don't have any questions at this time.
Okay. Alderman Guzikowski?
The only thing that I want to be conscious of, and I noticed in the information from the process involvement person, Scott, that they're doing this to help obviously keep the engines warm in the winter, because that'll help reduce things with the emission, but also help running engines because there's neighbors right behind there along Lois and Daniel Lane. So I just don't want them to be impacted by a lot more noise, but it sounds like that this is actually should help mitigate that. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Greg?
No, nothing from me. Thank you.
Dawn?
Nothing for me.
And Matt?
We don't have anything either.
Okay, Christine?
Nothing here either, thank you.
Okay. I have no further questions either. Pretty well explained. So,
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Faber did raise his hand just now.
Oh, please put him on.
Sure. Mr. Faber, you should be able to speak. You just have to unmute yourself.
Very good. Mayor, Commissioners, my name is Michael Faber, Capstone Quadrangle N17W24222 Riverwood Drive, Waukesha, Wisconsin. We're the neighboring commercial property owners with a building directly to the west, vacant land immediately to the south, which we are in discussion with the staff on a building design that we hope will be in front of you shortly for consideration. as well as the vacant land directly across 13th Street to the east. And I just thought it would be helpful. We think that the proposed parking spaces from the applicant are perfectly compatible with our site design that we'll be coming in front of you with. And so as a result, we support the request and urge the Plan Commission to approve our neighbor's request.
Thank you for the input, Mr. Faber. Glad to see that, you're that proactive looking ahead with design and how things will match up to another affected property. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Any other further discussion or questions? Hearing none, motion please on B.
Guzikowski makes a motion that the Plan Commission approves the site plan submitted by Scott. I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce this right, but Locks Crofel Laundry Services at the property at 9905 South 13th Street with the following conditions. 1, that all relevant code requirements remain in effect. 2, that all plans are revised and to include locations and screening for any new mechanical equipment, transformers, and utilities. 3, that the detailed revised plans are submitted in digital format to the Department of Community Development prior to submission of permit applications.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Hannah, aye.
Sullivan, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Lorik, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Guzikowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Good luck with your small little project there.
Thank you.
Item 6C is a consideration of conditional use amendment, permit amendment, requested by Mega Marts LLC for an amendment to the existing conditional use permit to allow outdoor display of retail merchandise on the property at 2320 West Ryan Road. So we're speaking about the pick and save, which I think we kind of addressed this earlier in spring. We had a few things going on there. So Carrie, if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is for the property at 2320 West Ryan Road. The current zoning is B4 conditional use. The conditional use is actually for the former animal hospital that used to be in the multi-tenant portion of that building. That conditional use permit is still active. However, Lakeshore Veterinary moved to a different adjacent parcel. So this is an amendment to that existing conditional use permit, and it's for the outdoor display of retail merchandise, specifically the propane exchange. And this is the entry elevation for the pick and save. It's the location of where they propose to put that propane exchange. You can see that it's about 9.5, just under 9.5 feet from the far side of the propane cage to the end of that sidewalk area. The cage dimensions are listed 70 inches by 44 inches by 30 inches. And there are a few things that are required in terms of location and compliance with fire department code. And those were incorporated into the conditions and restrictions. If there are any questions about what has been included in those conditions and restrictions, I will be happy to answer those questions. Page 2 of 5 basically states that there is one animal hospital and veterinary clinic that was approved in Ordinance 2632, and one area for outdoor storage and display of retail merchandise limited to one propane cage on the south elevation of the building, allowed in conformance with the conditions and restrictions. There's a separation for the specifics that were approved for the animal hospital and veterinary clinic and the outdoor storage and display of retail merchandise. The specifics for the outdoor display of retail merchandise include that it's limited to one propane cage measuring 70 inches in height by 44 inches in width and 30 inches in depth. In accordance with all fire protection requirements and codes, is allowed on the south elevation of the Pick and Save storefront. No other outdoor storage or outdoor display of any retail merchandise is allowed. The cage must be located at least 5 feet from any doorway or opening in a building frequented by the public where occupants have at least 2 means of egress, or at least 10 feet from any doorway or opening in a building or sections of a building that has only one means of egress as defined by NFPA 101 Life and Safety Code. That's the fire code that we are referencing in here. Basically states that if you have two means of egress, you have to be 5 feet away. If you only have one means of egress, you have to be 10 feet away. It allows for a little bit of flexibility in the exact location of the propane cage, although this is fairly close to where they're going to put it anyway. On-site filling of liquid propane tanks is prohibited, and fire department connections on the building shall not be blocked with any fencing, signage, or landscaping. And everything else within the conditional use permit is boilerplate at this time. If there are no questions from the commission, and if the commission is satisfied with the proposal, there is a suggested motion for approval on the screen. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Before we go to the commissioner, is there any comment from, I know Assistant Chief Havey's with us, any fire concerns before we go?
Good evening, Commissioner. This is Mike Havey, Assistant Chief with Fire. All of the review material was provided to the commission, or excuse me, to Carrie before the meeting. So as long as the applicants are in compliance with what the requirements are, we have no concerns.
Thank you. We'll go to the commission. Commissioner Hanna?
I have no question. It actually looks pretty straightforward, so nothing here.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Commissioner Sullivan?
We have no comments either.
Commissioner Carrillo?
No questions.
Commissioner Lorick?
No questions or concerns. Thank you.
Commissioner Guzikowski?
Few questions, not any questions, just a few comments. We've come a long way. I thank Carrie for working so closely with the fire department on this one, and then the other pick and save. And I appreciate pick and save complying.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Commissioner Siepert?
Yeah, I have a question for the applicant. Are these storage containers attached to the building or secured to the building?
The applicant is not on this one, but it looks like Doug raised his hand and may be able to speak to that.
Well, I wasn't going to speak to that. I would tend to doubt that. I think that the cages that I have seen don't appear to be secured to the building in any way. The one question I did have, and thank you, is whether or not the exhibit that we were shown in support of this showed actually two cages, and I assume that's one for incoming and one for outgoing. I just want to make sure that the condition and restrictions, when they say one structure or one cage, really clarified that to mean in its totality that actually maybe more than one, but it's just one unit.
One unit measuring 70 by 40 by, what is it, 30?
Carrie, did you get a sense from them? Is it one cage or two cages? Because on their exhibit, they showed two different cubicles there.
I think what happened was they gave us something initially that did not have any dimensions on it. And then when they talked to the propane company, they got the dimensions, but they did not necessarily update the rendering that they sent us. It is one cage, but I will confirm.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Doug. Good point. Fred, is there anything else?
No, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chandler?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay. I have none myself. All questions were asked or covered in the explanation. So barring no further discussion, motion, please.
Guzikowski makes a motion that the Plan Commission recommends to the Common Council approves a conditional use permit amendment to allow the outdoor display of retail merchandise, propane tanks on the property of 2320 West Ryan Road after a public hearing.
Chandler seconds.
Roll call.
Hanna, aye.
Sullivan, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Lorick, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Guzikowski, aye.
Siepert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Okay. All right. As Chris said, thank you very much to staff and to Mega Marts for working through this dilemma we had in spring. So appreciate it. Item D is consideration of a conditional use permit amendment. This is for the Mega Marts located at 8770 South Howell to allow outdoor display of retail merchandise. Carrie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the same request, just in a different location. They are looking for the outdoor storage of propane in front of their entrance at this location on Howell Avenue. The current zoning is B4. There is a conditional use permit that is affecting this property. That was previously issued in, I want to say, the 90s, 1995, Ordinance 1808. For bank and restaurant drive-through facilities on the property. You may recall the location of the multi-tenant portion has a drive-through on the, I guess that would be kind of the south side of the building. So this would add to that conditional use permit request for the propane exchange. Again, in front of the pick and save portion, although the multi-tenant portion does kind of blur here. The same size, although the location is a little bit closer to that fire lane. It's about 8.5 feet. The previous application showed just under 9.5 feet. Same requirements in terms of meeting fire codes for location, and we will confirm that it is 1 cage for ingoing, 1 cage for outgoing, so a total square footage as being provided. There is a suggested motion on the screen. If there are any questions with regard to the conditions and restrictions, again, these are kind of parsed out for the existing conditional use, and then the proposal, the same restrictions as with the other location are included in 3B. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Different location, same task to consider here. We'll start with Commissioner Chandler.
No questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Siebert.
No questions.
Alderman Guzekowski.
No questions.
Alderman Lorik.
No questions, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Carrillo.
No questions.
Commissioner Sullivan.
None.
And Commissioner Hanna. Anything?
Nothing here, no, thank you.
Okay. I would imagine fire has the same comments they had at 2320.
Mike Avey, Assistant Chief of Oak Creek Fire. Yes, no additional comments for this one.
Okay. I just have one comment, and it's really not super relevant to this, but over on Howell Avenue, if the public's out there watching, unless you drive a fire engine, do not park in the fire lane there. It's a bad habit of people there waiting in front of that merchandise. I'm surprised there ain't a picture of a car in that picture. That is reserved for our fire department in case of emergencies, so please keep those clear when possible. Other than that, I have no questions. Motion, please.
Guzekowski makes a motion that the Plan Commission recommends that the Common Council approves a conditional use permit amendment to allow outdoor display of retail merchandise propane tanks on the property at 8770 South Howell Avenue after a public hearing.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Anna, aye.
Sullivan, aye.
Carrillo, aye.
Lorik, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much, and good luck. Item E, review site and building plans for Verizon Wireless for an equipment accessory building on the property at 7555 South 10th. Carrie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a review for a proposed equipment shelter that is behind the existing building on this property. Verizon does have the full support of the property owner in order to locate this here. The current zoning of the property is M1, and this is to be utilized specifically for Verizon Wireless equipment. There is a nearby pole on which their tower equipment is already located. As part of this proposal, staff did work with the applicant in order to request some pavement to be extended to the fenced lease area. Currently, there is gravel there, so we're making a little bit of an improvement to that access point. And on the screen right now is the proposed site plan showing you the location of that proposed shelter. Now, the lease area is not quite as large or the same dimensions as the blue box. The fenced-in area actually is more in line with the north elevation of the building. It's in line with that line, the existing building line. So there is a fence that is around the compound, and within that fence will be the shelter itself and a generator and the HVAC system for the building. This is an unmanned building, an unstaffed building for equipment only, and it will be necessary just for maintenance purposes for anybody to actually be in that building for any period of time. In fact, the plans state that it is not going to be manned. It's not for human habitation. It's packed with equipment. The compound, again, will be fenced. There will be razor wire on top, barbed wire on top. There are 2 gates located on the north side and the west side of this proposed compound. The lease area is a little bit larger than that and includes a utility easement, as you can see on the site plan going down to the south. They will be utilizing the existing access drives, but again, paving just a little bit farther north and west so that they can access the compound and get in there with utility vehicles or whatever needs to be done there. The gates are, if you can see the site plan enlarged a little bit, again, everything within that compound area, access from the north and the west. And the proposed fence and gates chain link, again, with some barbed wire on top. However, that's more for security purposes than anything else. And the proposed location is more than 100 feet to the nearest property line to the west, which borders a residential zoning district. There is extensive landscaping on actually the residential portion of the property line that would further screen this particular area, which is fairly small in comparison to the rest of the building. What's on the screen right now is a proposed layout that shows the interior of the building. This may change slightly, but this was provided just to give you an idea of what the equipment would be. Also to let you know that the HVAC systems and the standby generator, as noted here, are on the outside of the building itself, but within the fenced compound. On the screen right now are 3 proposed structures. The structure itself is proposed to be constructed with concrete, and these are prefabricated structures. So while we don't know exactly what the design will end up being in terms of the aesthetic, it will be a concrete building, and it will look fairly similar to one of these 3. In fact, it will probably be closest to the image on the far left. With that information, if there are no further questions, there is a suggested motion for approval subject to 2 conditions of approval on the screen right now for Plan Commission consideration. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. I don't know if the applicant's with us, if they'd like to say anything before we go to the commission.
We do have an agent for the applicant available if questions are needed.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. We'll see if he is needed. We'll start with Commissioner Hanna.
Yes, actually, I do have a question for Carrie. From the location map I'm looking at, I don't know if it's exactly located within another industrial park or industrial area, but is there any way we can add landscaping to this building or some sort of aesthetic instead of this like a block of concrete? Or this is shielded from the road?
It is shielded from the road. In fact, if you can't really see it on this particular graphic very well, but it is on the west side of the building, which is the farthest from South 10th Street. And it is, 10th Street is actually part of North Branch in this area.
Okay, so as long as not seen from the street, I'll be okay with no landscaping or anything like that. It just looks like a big box of concrete.
Right. It's actually going to be completely screened from 10th Street by the existing building. And when I did speak with the applicant regarding landscaping, none of the existing landscaping on the rest of the property would be affected by this proposal. So what's there now will remain intact.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
We have nothing from engineering.
Hey, Commissioner Carrillo?
Nothing.
Greg?
I don't have any questions or concerns. It was already spoken to that it's kind of tucked back behind that building down 10th Street, so I don't have any worries about it.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
I have none. Thank you.
Okay. Fred?
No questions.
Okay. Chauncey?
I do have a question for the applicant. How often would someone have to go to this building for either upgrades or for repairs?
Yeah, that's a good question. As mentioned, this is an unmanned facility that's fairly technical in its nature. So we could say that a tech would come out, let's say once or twice a month, to perform maintenance work inside the shelter. So it shouldn't present any additional traffic situation or any sort of nuisance with the service tech truck coming in and out of the parking lot. So that's about it, really. It's going to be a fairly intact, complete, high-tech facility that will run fairly hands-free. And like I said, maybe once or twice a month, a tech will come out and take a look at the inside of the structure.
Bill, would you please state your name and address for the record?
Sure. This is Bill Schrader. I'm with Insight Re Inc. Our offices are at 1S660 Midwest Road, Oak Brook Terrace, Illinois. And I'm a authorized agent for Verizon Wireless.
Thank you. Okay,
That's
anything
the end
else?
of my questions. Oh, my apologies, Mayor.
No, that's okay. Just want to make sure you got everything answered you need. All my questions have been answered as well, either by the presentation or just by the commissioners asking. So barring any other discussion, motion please.
Guzikowski will make a motion that the site plan review and proposed accessory equipment building west of the existing building on the property at 7555 South 10th Street with the following conditions. 1, that all relevant code requirements remain in effect. 2, that all detailed revised plans are submitted in digital format to the community development prior to submission of permit applications.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Hannah, aye. Sorry, I had computer issues here.
That's okay, it happens.
Sullivan, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Lorick, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Guzikowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Thank you very much and good luck.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Item 6F is a landscape plan review. It is to review landscape plans submitted by the United States Postal Service for the facility on the property at 2201 East College Avenue. Carrie?
Actually, Mr. Mayor, Doug will be the one presenting this item.
Okay, thank you. Doug, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor, Commission members. Appreciate being here this evening. The applicant, the United States Postal Service, is requesting the Plan Commission concurrence with a landscape concept for the development of the property at 2201 East College Avenue. And I say concurrence because, as we've been reminded many times, the Postal Service is not subject to local codes and regulations. And there is an extensive history, obviously, on the site with the USPS, and rather going into a great deal of history on that history, this report will focus solely on the landscaping, because the landscaping is perhaps the most meaningful way to provide some mitigation of the impacts of this development on the Chapel Hills neighborhood. Now, to provide context for this discussion, the Commission has been provided a copy of the plan proposal from 2008. Just note, however, that that plan was never approved by the Plan Commission, but it does provide some context for our discussion this evening. And as well, given the fact that the USPS has on more than one occasion committed to implementing and meeting their obligations with respect to the 2008 conditions and restrictions, which included this plan, it provides some helpful context for our discussion this evening. So for the purposes of this report, and I'm going to pull up hopefully the overall plan, if you all can see that. This is the plan from 2008, and I think it's relevant, not to the extent that we're looking to duplicate this plan, but it, again, provides some context of some of the key elements that the Plan Commission and the city was looking for in order to mitigate some of the impacts on the neighborhood back then. And some of those key elements, which were actually written on this plan, it said to protect and save all possible trees in the perimeter landscape buffer, which is, if you can see my cursor, this area here. Also called for the filling in of any voids in that existing perimeter landscape buffer with native evergreen trees. Also called for supplementing the existing perimeter landscape buffer with native evergreen trees. Talked about that the site landscaping would comply with the city ordinance for perimeter green space requirements. A couple other things of note on that plan, and they only apply to landscaping on a peripheral basis. And we'll talk about these and how they integrate as part of this as well. It says that a 20-foot sound attenuation wall be constructed adjacent to the neighborhood at the south end of the main building and parking. And that, if you can see my cursor, would have been in this area. It also says an 8-foot solid screen wall between the main employee parking lot and the residential parking areas along Pennsylvania Avenue. That would have been in here. Called for areas for berming, along with a typical berm and landscape detail showing a maximum 6-foot berm and landscaping along College Avenue, Pennsylvania Avenue, and indications that the existing vegetative buffer would remain to be supplemented as needed. And further conditions and restrictions, again, some other things that were in there. The loading docks were to be substantially screened from the public view with screening walls and landscaping. Landscaping screening walls were to be constructed along all public streets and along any areas abutting a residential zoning district. The design of the screen walls and sound barriers were to be approved by the Plan Commission. That any fencing on the front, within the front or street yard or adjacent to residential properties was to be decorative wrought iron. That chain link fencing was only to be permitted to the extent that it is screened by a berm and landscaping at least equal in height to the proposed fence. That fencing was to be, the fencing placement, height and style was to be approved by the Plan Commission. Also said the stormwater management pond was to be fenced and screened by a berm and landscaping, again, equal in height to the proposed fence. And it called for a conservation easement to be recorded for the area south of the stormwater management pond, excuse me. So as we all know, in reality, the USPS went well beyond, and I should say probably more appropriately, its contractor, went well beyond its earlier commitments with respect to clearing of vegetative buffers. And the scaled back scope of the project also eliminated structural elements, specifically some of the sound attenuation walls that would have provided some protection to the adjacent neighborhood. So the landscaping plan that was initially submitted in support of the 2020 proposal, which I didn't even show because it was so bad, to be honest with you, was grossly insufficient. Recognizing that the full implementation of that 2008 plan was not likely to occur, again, despite the verbal and written commitments by USPS, staff worked with local USPS representatives to identify alternatives that were more likely to be implemented that would provide the most effective screening of the neighborhood to the south and the east. And I did want to make that comment because, you know, although we are rather critical of the USPS as a whole in terms of meeting its obligations, I will say that working with their local representative, Joe Cece, and I don't know if Joe's on the call this evening, he has truly looked for solutions that really help to mitigate those impacts on the neighborhood. So with that in mind, I'm going to break down my comments and show you the 2008 plan in its entirety. The comments respond to the sheets of the plan, and so this being the first sheet of the plan, it really, what was striking was almost the near complete lack of landscaping proposed for the perimeter of the property. And again, recognizing again that the scope of the building has reduced, there is still a requirement to berm and landscape and those areas and that are proposed for chain link fencing, which still shows up on this plan. And while fencing is not part of this plan per se, and should be reviewed and approved separately, the plans do show the perimeter of the property fenced. And if the property is going to be fenced using security fencing and chain link fencing, these areas need to be bermed and landscaped per that 2008 agreement. Oh, what was that? Sorry about that. I think Siri got involved in our conversation here. Additional landscaping would also need to be provided at the northeast corner of the property. This is a prominent entrance to both the cities of South Milwaukee and Oak Creek and should be treated as such with properly designed and maintained landscape areas. It's showing absolutely nothing on that corner. The second sheet, which is on the area which is affecting the Chapel Hills neighborhood on the south end. Obviously, the Chapel Hills neighborhood has been the most heavily impacted by the failure of UPS to abide by those 2008 agreements. And nowhere has this been more apparent than the removal of the trees and the vegetated buffer area between the park and that stormwater management basin. So staff has worked closely with local USPS representatives, again, to offer alternatives that would mitigate the impacts in the neighborhood. For example, staff proposed to minimize the use of security fencing by restricting its use to areas immediately surrounding the facility and stormwater pond. I mean, not only would this be a benefit to the neighborhood and the adjacent park, it would also result in fewer impacts to the unused wooded area at the south end of the property, and would also result in significant cost savings to the property owner. So the revised landscaping plan proposal does pull that fencing closer and tighter to the pond and parking areas. So even though land to the south and adjacent to the park is still owned by USPS, it would not be fenced in. The fence would be pulled back closer to their pond and closer to their parking. Just a note, I mean, and again, working just to highlight some of the miscommunication I think that has taken place between the contractor, USPS, and perhaps the city. I mean, USPS actually had worked with the city and the forester at that time to plant some additional trees between the park and the facility in order to provide some additional landscaping that on the USPS property. And when the contractor for USPS went in and prepped the area for fencing, they took out those trees, which was disappointing. Just note that, just to mention that we expect the landscaping to be adjusted to compensate for those trees that were put in by the city and were taken out by that contractor. Well, USPS did explore the possibility of, again, deeding those unused portions of the property back to the city via conservation easements, what have you. They were not able to do so, which is fine. And I think that the effort represents a very positive step towards actually taking a look at the impacts of the neighborhood and trying to address a landscaping plan that mitigates some of those impacts. One of those included the addition of 2 berms, and you can kind of see those marked in those yellow areas here as a way of screening the neighborhood and the park from the truck parking lot. And again, recall, there was a screen wall that was proposed to be extended as part of your plan originally. That has not been, to my knowledge, put in the 100% plans. Again, this is where that sound wall would have been. I've not seen that in any plans as well, although we should definitely talk about that. It is a positive step and one that I would hope that the neighborhood would embrace. With that, the only thing I'll say about that is that it probably doesn't go far enough. And then we'd like to see that wrapped around to the south end of that as well to provide additional screening and landscaping atop that berm to provide the maximum extent of landscaping and screening to that plan. That current plan, and you can see it here, does show some extensive landscaping along the border with the Chapel Hills Park. And I won't go into the details, but there's a mix of deciduous and coniferous trees along that approximately 1,100-foot boundary of the park. This certainly does not make up for the areas that have been impacted by the unauthorized clearing of this buffer, but it is a positive step on behalf of the USPS. Again, just we want to make sure that we get the initial heights and the mature heights of those trees to make sure that what is being proposed as screening is actually going to be adequate to achieve that purpose. Again, we talked about that, the extension of the berm to the south and to the east of the loading area, and that additional landscaping in the form of coniferous trees be incorporated into the design of all berms. Sheet L.1.2, which is in your plans, affects the area along the residential properties and along Poplar Avenue and Pennsylvania Avenue. And for the most part, that buffer between the residential properties on Poplar has been maintained as it is designated as a wetland. Still, the proposed plans do call for supplementing this existing vegetation with 5 maples and 8 dark green arborvitae, which you can see in this area. The L1.3 shows the employee parking area, again, scaled back significantly from the original 2008 proposal. The only comments on that and are to say that the only landscaping that is shown in this area are the 2 entrance islands. It is important to note that landscaping within this parking area still will be subject to the landscaping requirements as contained in our municipal code. So you're going to be looking for additional landscape islands and peninsulas there. Sheets 4, 5, and 6 show landscaping, or in many cases, lack of landscaping along College Avenue and Pennsylvania Avenue. And I just want to talk about Pennsylvania Avenue for the moment. I mean, this area, as part of the clearing of the site, they removed whatever buffer was there. And it wasn't a huge buffer, but there still was some vegetation. This does propose to replace that with a series, again, of maples and arborvitae as a screen for that. Also, again, this is the area that was called for the 8-foot fence on the plan, and it's actually called up as an 8-foot solid screen wall. So we really do want to have a conversation with those property owners, with the Plan Commission, as to whether or not the landscaping as proposed is adequate to eliminate the need for that screen wall, and if it's not, whether or not they still want the wall or want additional landscaping there. So again, just an item for further consideration. And finally, talking about the College Avenue plans, I guess the plans are remarkable only to the extent that they show very little landscaping along College Avenue, aside from 5 maples along the over 600 feet of frontage of that building. And just to set the stage again, that building was never reviewed by the Plan Commission as was originally envisioned by the Plan Commission and Town Council back in 2008. It does not meet our architectural standards. And if ever there was a building in need of screening, that is it. With apologies to the architects for the building. The one thing I will note is that the 2008 plans did illustrate a 20-foot tall screen wall to screen the loading area from College Avenue. That screening wall is absent from the landscaping plan and the 100% plans that were submitted. Those same plans, as a contrast, did show 22 different deciduous trees along that same stretch. I'm wrapping up here, so forgive me for the length of this, but it's important. The 2 employee break areas, which are covered and surrounded by security fencing, are right up in front on College Avenue. They're only proposed to be screened by a series of ornamental grasses. Again, not acceptable. As for foundation plantings, the only areas proposed for landscaping are limited planting beds directly adjacent to the building around one entrance in here, with a series of hostas along the north part of the wall. Probably not appropriate for a commercial building of that size. So in summary, while the proposed landscaping plans are really indicative of a positive trend by the local USPS representatives to work with the city and neighborhood, they really do fall short from the 2008 agreements and plans. So when we talk about a suggested motion, and I know there'll be a lot of discussion on this, we are really, the plan commission will be concurring with those landscaping plans. Obviously, the USPS does not need to abide by the city's codes with respect to that, other than the fact that they committed to it verbally and in writing as part of the public review of the 2020 plans for that. But we do have the suggested motion there. You know, I do have a more interactive type of display, as we'll be certain to get into as we talk about the plans. I know that there's a number of people that do want to talk about this. So with that, I will be quiet now, and I will listen to the commission, and I will listen to the public. And I believe that, and hopefully Joe is out there on behalf of the USPS. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Doug. Commissioners, that was a lot to take in. I mean, we're going to discuss this. I do understand we have some callers. I think we'll allow them to go first. They've been waiting pretty patiently. Kevin, is there anybody in the queue?
All right, first up we have Mary Liebisch. Mary, you'll have to hit *6 on your phone to speak. All right, then Mary, go ahead. Name and address.
This is Mary Leach, 6405 South Pennsylvania Avenue.
Okay, go ahead, Mary.
I'm particularly interested in this conversation, and I must admit I don't have plans that are at the clerk's office, and I will seek those. But I am the first house among those 5 that have the post office in back, which means I am exposed to the west and the north. And it's the north that I'm confused on, because I have a lawn service, and I know what I own. I mean, I know it's on the tax list, and it has been marked that that's my property, and they mow that. And I used to mow the other just to keep the weeds down, even though I didn't own it. I just didn't want that weed bed there. And then when the post office started the building, I stopped the mowing. I told my lawnmowers, don't put that on my bill. I don't own it. But it's just a pile of grass, and then there's trees that were there before that are not, I don't own those, and I wonder what they're going to do with that section north of my house. The west of the house is pretty understandable. I think that, some kind of evergreen or some kind of tree, but, just to block it, I'm just walking right onto the property and back.
Okay,
maybe
Mary.
I should be dealing just with the planning commission and work with them because it sounds like they're very involved in listening to the conversation. There's been a lot of conversation with the planning commission and the post office. And I think they're pretty well aware of what's going on.
Well, they were, and there was a lot of conversation in '08. As Doug kind of stated, when they came back around here years later, they didn't consult quite as much with the city regarding what they wanted to do and how they were going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, they are the post office, so they kind of exercise that immunity from city ordinance. I guess I'm stating that correctly.
Mm-hmm.
But that's something we can address. That would be your north side property, and it even looks like they could beef up the western part of your back.
Oh, there's a big part of the west, because if you look at the map that you furnished me, before this conference, I'm the first house among the 5. But, you go down towards Chapel Hills, and that's number 5 house, and then I'm number 1, and I have the biggest lot of the 5 properties. And I have the north exposure because that's where the post office is. And then I have the west exposure. So I really have 2 areas of concern. And what really confuses me is what I own or what I don't own, or what I can ask for or what I am eligible for in terms of the north property, because that is right now, it's a mess.
Understood, Mary. Is there a representative? Should we go? How many callers do we have, Kevin? Do we have quite a few in the queue?
We have about 6 more, and there's no representative for the postal service.
Well, that stinks. Okay.
Should I talk to Doug then, or should I talk to the clerk's office and get those plans? I noticed in the letter we got, and I had talked to her too, that the plans are on file, you know, with the post office. You know, visually I can see what they've done because it's right in my backyard.
Yeah.
And then I look
And
over to
Mary,
the north.
Mary, I'd be
Pardon?
happy to talk to you. I mean, I will say that on the plans that they were submitted, they don't show anything on your north property line except the fence.
Okay. Okay. So then where do I have some questions that, as I said, I don't know what I own or what I don't own. I know where my property line ends, but then there's another stake further north, and that's where I'm not mowing. And then Van Beck used to, well, I'm telling you way too much. Van Beck used to own that land, and there's a house there, and he demolished the house, but the foundation, this basement foundation is still an open exposure. So I got a hole over there, and now there's grass going around it, and my lawn is mowed because my mowers come and mow. But I told them, you know, I don't want to pay for what I don't own. So they don't. I told them don't mow it. Don't mow it.
Mary, I'd be happy to. You know, while we won't actually come out there and show you your stakes, I mean, we can kind of tell you, you know, X number of feet from the house and something like that. I mean, I'd be happy to work with you one-on-one with that.
Okay.
And the best way to do. Oh, go ahead, Doug. Sorry.
Yeah, if you just want to give me a call tomorrow, I can send you some bigger plans which kind of show you, give you a better idea of where your actual lot line is.
Okay.
And Mary, if you don't do internet, you know, one way or another, we can make some accommodations if you feel like venturing to City Hall to safely distance and show you what's going on.
And I can send that to you in the mail as well.
Thank you, Doug.
And that's Doug talking, right? Doug Seymour?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I've talked to him in the past because because we sold that property to the post office back in 2008. And my sister, we owned the back, 11 acres. You know, Van Beck owned on the one side, and then we owned the 11, and then Don Bordeaux owned in front of Chapel Hills.
Mm-hmm.
So that's our property that we sold. So I have the contracts and the plans from 2008, but my sister didn't have the current ones, and I don't either. So if you can I don't have a computer, and that's a problem. So that's why I'm on the phone. But I can talk to Doug and maybe get what you have, and then maybe he can tell me, you know, what I do, where I sit. I don't know. I'm seeing stakes. I'm seeing posts. I don't know what it means. And I have a whole row of trees, and I thought, okay, those are old trees. They're going to knock them down because, you know, that was from the old property. But they put a fence, according to people that are driving. I'm kind of immobile. I'm stuck in the house, so I can't really see too much. People drive by and they say there's a fence up that goes against those trees. So it's like the trees are too far to stop snow breaks or anything for me, and here I'm sitting with a weed bed. I don't know. But I will talk to Doug tomorrow, then I'll give him a call, and then you can go to your other callers. And we'll try to, I mean, like you said, they're going to do what they want. They just kind of started before you knew what was going on. So there are some issues there, but I'll call Doug and then you can go to the other callers. But thanks much.
Appreciate that, Mary. I'm
Okay.
glad you got on.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Kevin, would you like to queue up the next person, please?
All right. Next up, we have Russell. Russell, you should be able to unmute yourself. We'll need your name and address for the record.
Russell Burkles, 2051 East Poplar Avenue. I'm heavily concerned with the tree line. They are currently in the process of planting on the end of Poplar. So if you could zoom into that area. This tree line, David Frank is currently digging holes, and they have a whole bunch of trees parked out there ready to be plucked in. So there's nothing we can say or do to change anything there. That's going to be said and done by tomorrow. I happen to see this project every single day, and consequently, it wasn't until roughly 2 or 3 weeks ago that they put the berm up. Prior to that, there was a big hill of dirt that they took half of it away. I don't know where they took it to. What my comment on my registration was that I would like to see a pine type trees planted along the top so that they were close enough to grow into each other, thereby giving a windbreak and also a sight line break from their trucks that the tractors will be parked right behind pretty much my house. And a lot of the tractor trailers will be out in that area by the docks. I can only congratulate your Parks Department on the plantings they've put in to that area of the park that is behind my house. Received those plans early spring, and excellent choice of trees that were planted there. And consequently, absolutely no complaint on my side. They did a lot of diligence in maintaining them through our drought area this summer. So that was good. The biggest problem I have with the post office stuff is once they plant it, they're going to wash their hands. What happens to the things that die? Let's face it, not every one of these trees are going to make it. That's sort of a known fact. So all I can say is that somewhat worthless, the meeting tonight, because they are doing what they do. I don't know if any of you have spent any time coming over, looking at the situation, but you know, they're in my backyard constantly. The damage to my house and trees from that lack of dust management is there as well. As far as Mary Leach is concerned, there is a fence that is going around her property. It's on the north side and on the south side. I would simply say that you cut the grass in your property lines, since you know what they are, and leave the rest, and then put in a noxious weed complaint to the city and let the city deal with that from that standpoint. Doug, you did a very good job of explaining the lack of cooperation from the post office, which is the first statement I've heard from you since this thing began. And unfortunately, we in Chapel Hill subdivision are the ones that are going to put up with the brunt of this problem. I think that's all I got for now.
Okay, thank you, Russell. And again, you know, behind the scenes, we are working and reaching out to the post office, trying to get back as close as we can to that 08 agreement we had. Obviously, you know, by the way things are turning out, we're not quite there. That's an understatement. But Doug and Carrie and staff will continue to work out there with concerns. So it's good that we have them recorded. Okay, if that's it, Russell, we'll move on to the next person in the queue.
All right, next up, we have Kristen. Kristen, you should be able to speak. You have to unmute yourself in Zoom.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, name and address, please.
Okay, Kristen Chmielewski. Address is 2030 East Norwood Drive. Yep, right there. I think Doug pretty much explained a lot of what I was calling about. I've had a lot of conversations with the neighbors that right behind me and of course right next to me. The ones we're most concerned about is, yes, the post office looks like they're going to be planting a lot of trees in there. Started today, looks great. We're still worried about what that sound barrier is going to look like around the semi parking lot. Pretty much around that fence. There was a very large rock there. I know when I was talking, I did send an email to Doug. I'm not sure if he got that one a while ago, but right where that semi parking lot is, there was the berm that is there now. And then there's a giant rock, and there was like an L-shaped berm, and it did hide a lot from us. And we were kind of happy that it did hide that. And all of a sudden that berm was gone. So now there is no sound barrier there. There's no dust protection. There's not even going to be trees there. I talked to even the landscapers, because I am fortunate enough to be home every day. And, you know, I do live right next to the property, just like Russell does. So we do see this all the time. But when I did try to reach out with the landscapers, they said no trees were even, you know, they were told that none were going to go right around that area. So that's my biggest concern, is what is going to go around there. Is it going to be that 20-foot wall like you were talking about back in 2008? Something. Put the berm back. You know, right now, I know that Doug mentioned the berms are supposed to be taller than the fencing. They're not. They don't hide the fencing. The fencing is actually taller than the berms. The only berm that covers it is going to be the one behind Russell's house, over at the end of Poplar. That berm actually hides the fencing, but over on our side, we can see the fencing. So those were my biggest concerns, along with a couple neighbors that I did talk to that said I could talk for them. We would just like to know what's going in over there, in hopes that something is going to be covering that semi parking lot.
And again, staff will continue to pursue that wall and the berm and everything that went along with the 08 plan.
I appreciate that. I do appreciate being able to talk with Doug. There's been a couple times he has come out here and talked to me. So Doug, I really appreciate you getting back to me on everything and actually coming out and spending the time with me. So I do appreciate that. And at this time, I think we can go on to the next caller. That's really all I had.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Appreciate it. Okay, Kevin, cue up the next one.
All right, next up, Heidi Rodriguez. Looks like she is no longer connected. Michael Kness. Michael, you should be able to unmute yourself in Zoom then.
Are we there yet?
Yes, we are.
Name and address.
Michael Kness, 6419 South Pennsylvania Avenue.
Go ahead, Michael.
Well, I got some issues with that back, the west side of my property line, which faces the post office parking area, right next to Mary.
Okay.
They put a chain link fence in on top of the berm, and in front of that, between our two property lines, looks like they got a drainage ditch.
They, at the bottom of the berm, they have a drainage.
Chain link fence is on top of the berm.
Okay, and then down below, between your yard and theirs, they put in a ditch. Am I misunderstanding?
Well,
that?
it's not really a ditch. It looks like it could be. It looks like a drainage. It's not a design for a drainage ditch, but it's sloping down in both directions like a ditch would be.
Okay. Again, boy, Michael, I don't have great answers tonight on this
I
one.
didn't figure you would. I want to voice my concerns, like get them in.
No, you're more than welcome to do that. Again, we're gonna, part of this whole motion is really to pursue that 08 plan and make them concur with that, with what they agreed to previously, and our staff's been reaching out to them trying to get that, because as Doug explained, this is highly inadequate for what we expected and doesn't meet our standards, to say the least.
Yeah, no, that's it's kind of goofy looking, but if we're stuck with it, I reckon we're stuck with it. Wonder who's going to maintain on my side of the fence.
Yes, that is their property, and again, it could be a long-term enforcement battle with the
That'll
USPS.
be, and the weeds will grow as tall as that fence. If it ain't my property, I'm with the guy that was talking earlier after Mary. And I live next to Mary. I'll tell Mary too, don't touch that property. It's theirs. Let them deal with it.
No, you're correct, but I mean, you know, we'd like to do it right the first time rather than fight for years and have unhappy residents and
That's well, I
unhappy.
don't think there's too many people happy with it because I have the same issues as everybody else around that thing. I got 6 inches of dust every week in the house that I got to take care of along with the vehicles and everything else.
Understood.
Can't imagine what the exhaust is going to be when it happens. Especially with west winds predominantly. We're going to be eating some fuel.
Hoping not. We hear you. We get you.
I said I used to drive. I know what
Yeah.
truckers do. They ain't going to sit in their truck and be cold.
No, you're correct. You're correct.
I thank you for your time.
No, thank you for the input, Mike.
If you
Appreciate
could
it.
keep us posted on what's going on there and some kind of communication, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, as we learn things, you know, we don't want to put out false information. So when we get solid stuff, we usually try to. I know we've done a couple mailings through there, particularly when we could finally get them to do a town hall meeting, so to speak. I know that it was challenging this year, to say the least. And again, it all changed.
I understand. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Have a good night.
Okay, Kevin, next.
All right, next we have Robert Linziak. Robert, you should be able to unmute yourself in Zoom and then name and address, please.
Hi, this is Robert Olenichek. My address is 2050 East Norwood Drive. And I think Kristen said it best. I am her neighbor. And the big concern we have has to do with the berm, how it's short, how it doesn't wrap around the trailer parking lot, and what it does in terms of sight lines, noise, and everything else. So I pretty much would be echoing exactly what she indicated.
Well, thank you, Robert. Again, you know, we'll be discussing this with staff, and they're doing their best to get back to that original agreement on the 08. So.
Okay, and for me, noise is a big thing in terms of if you're talking 300 trailers a day, like they indicated at the last town hall, that becomes a big concern.
Understood.
Thank you for your time.
Okay. Next, please.
All right, next up we have Rachel. Rachel, you should be able to unmute yourself, and then we'll need your name and address for the record.
Sure. Is it working now? Yep. Okay. Rachel Miliaka, 6470 South Crane Drive, and I am on the dead end of Crane Drive. Yep, that one.
Okay.
So my concern is just the small amount of trees that we're going to have on the other side of the fence. To, you know, there was a tree line there before that the post office had taken down. So I don't know that that's going to be enough of a barrier between us and the post office for the sound, as well as, you know, now we're going to have those west winds come whipping through there. And then there already is a water problem. So if they're going to be watering those trees, there's going to be more of a water problem in that, especially in that corner, because it seems like the water is accumulating there now. So those last two rains, I know that they were extreme, but we did have big puddles of water in that area. So, and that was one of my concerns that I brought forth the last time that we met with the US Post Office, was water. And that's still going to be a problem. And then we do have, as the other two neighbors up the street had said, they did put the chain link fence and it's on top of the berm. So there's nothing covering that chain link fence.
Gotcha. Okay, Rachel. As we talk with the commissioners, you know, we'll get a better explanation of their stormwater management. And I would imagine, I don't exactly think they went through our engineering department, although I could be corrected. But when we talk to the commissioners, our engineer will give us a little better handle on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Is that it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Kevin, next.
All right, lastly, we have Nancy. Nancy, you should be able to unmute yourself, and then we'll need your name and address for the record.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, Nancy Subcheck, 6485 South Crane Drive. So right across from Rachel, on the end of Crane. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, my problem is the landscaping also, not enough. I'm just looking at a big parking lot or whatever they're doing there, a big fence. But my other question is, I have a dead tree, and I believe it's on their property because their markers are showing it on their property. We have their corner lot line marker right next to the tree, and it's dead, and it's gonna fall on my property. I mean, I was gonna have it taken down because I wasn't sure if it was mine, but the tree service told me it's theirs because they have their lot line marker there. So now I don't know who to contact about that. They took down except for trees that needed to be taken down.
Doug, can I ask for some advice on that one? Is that something we should clarify whose property that's on?
Sure, and again, well, the city can't necessarily come out and mark your property lines. I mean, we can kind of, based on what we know about distances from your house or what have you, give you a pretty good indication usually of where your property line is. And I think that the USPS probably knows exactly where their property line is. They probably got that marked someplace in that, as I recall, when I've been out there, there have been some stakes out there, and I just don't recall what the specifics of that were. But
yeah,
what I can tell you, Nancy, is maybe we can get you in touch with Joseph Cece, who's their local representative, and he's been, you know, as responsive as he can be, recognizing that, you know, he's
okay.
He works for people, but he's been pretty responsive, at least in listening to the concerns of some of the neighbors, and maybe we can get something done there. That seems like an easy fix. I mean, if it's a dead tree, let's get it out of there.
Yeah, and it says right on that marker that they placed there, corner lot line, USPS. It says it right on the thing, on the wooden stake. But it's north of the tree. You know, the tree is kind of like there, but it's right next to it, but it's a big tree. So maybe part of it might be on my property, but most of it would be on theirs.
Yeah, that could be.
You know, it's probably a couple 100-year-old tree or something too. It's huge. But okay, if someone could get me in touch with Joseph, that would be great.
Okay. Yeah, staff has their hands full with this one for sure. Kevin, was that the last resident?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Before we get into big time discussion, let's go to the commission, and I'm sure there's some questions there. Commissioner Christine Hanna, you want to start us?
Sure. My first question is, do we have any maintenance agreement with USPS?
I'm sorry, maybe I didn't mean to butt in, but this is Doug Seymour. We've got a set of conditions and restrictions from 2008, which have since expired. And we have no other agreements with the post office other than their word that they would abide by those 2008 agreements.
So Doug, if I understand you correctly, you had a maintenance agreement from 2008 but expired. So my next question is, are we considering to have a maintenance agreement for that landscaping if approved, to make sure that it follows that the landscaping plan we're looking at? and addressing all those resident concerns?
Well, again, from my perspective, I mean, when they say they committed to, to fulfilling all of their obligations from the 2008 plan, the maintenance of that landscaping would be one of them.
Okay, what if they don't follow that maintenance agreement? Then what happens?
Then there is well, shouldn't say that. Then we have the avenue that's available to us is to work with our elected officials to remind them of their obligation to maintain that property.
Okay. Maybe I'm asking too many questions, but.
No, not at all.
Okay, was that done on 2008? I was just reading the report that was submitted, and it seemed that the contractor, or USPS, which is their contractor, did not follow that landscaping plan, did not abide by it, but I haven't seen any consequences for that. So
yeah, there's a lot of that going around, and there are no consequences from the city's perspective, because the Postal Service is not bound by any local regulations.
I know they're states, yeah, I know. But there should be some sort of a reaction or consequences that can be written and agreed upon. And this is how we can get to the state regulations.
Well,
somehow.
It's actually federal.
Oh, sure, yes, you're right,
Yeah.
you're right.
So, I mean, we've been dealing with the likes of Senator Baldwin, Senator Johnson, Congressman Stiles, and anybody we can get.
And what is their stance so far on that?
Again, they're trying to back the city to get the post office to abide by the agreement, but it's a difference.
And again, their response, and I'm sorry, Mayor, and this is frustrating for us all, their response is, we will comply with the terms of the 2008 agreement, but they aren't.
So is there any way for the city to stop them, revoke that agreement, do some
No.
sort of, nothing?
No.
Huh. So why are we even looking at that? What if they're gonna do whatever they wanna do?
We are trying to make the best of a bad situation.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just, okay, for the residents, my only comment on this is we have to save as many trees as possible, which I think from what I heard from the second resident that they are already cutting trees in his backyard. So if we can stop that and save some trees, and instead of go back and planting some more trees that are not gonna be maintained and showing the chain link fence and the barbed wires on top and exposing all their backyard to this parking yard, that would be nice, because that will impact their properties for sure. That's all what I had. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Matt?
Man, we're not hearing you for some reason.
Hear me now?
Oh, there you are, Matt.
Sorry about that, headphones weren't working. I just wanted to echo some of the residents out there, their concerns, and Christine Hanna, Commissioner Hanna's concerns. You know, we've been out there a number of times, or driven by there on some of our other inspections, and just kind of stop, take a look. You know, they clearly, Postal Service went way out of bounds, in my opinion, as far as clearing and grubbing. I've done enough projects in my 20-some years of my career. You don't clear and grub unless you need to. They didn't need to. So I think as much as we can continue to push to increase the amount of landscaping between the residentials and their property, and buffer that. I know we'll never get the density of the trees that were naturally there and the underbrush and things along those lines, but we need to do as much as we possibly can as a commission to continue to push for berms, sound barriers, land barriers, vision barriers, anything we can. As far as some of the concerns mentioned on stormwater management, I believe we didn't have the opportunity to approve the stormwater management. We did have the opportunity to provide comments. Our stormwater management engineer did work with MMSD and Sewer Pack to provide some comments, which I do believe they were implemented to help and get those as close as city standards. I believe they met the MMSD standards, which are close to the cities. So as far as stormwater, and that's just the stormwater ponds, I believe it was Russell that was concerned with Michael was the one that was concerned with the drainage along Pennsylvania with that berm just west of his property. We obviously can go out there and take a look at it. We didn't get a chance obviously to review the plans and provide a lot of comments that were addressed. So engineering can go out and kind of nose around a little bit if the commission would like us to, just to get a feel for it.
I would appreciate that. And Rachel mentioned the same thing. She was at 6470 South Crane Drive.
Yeah, I believe that kind of all drains down towards that property area. So we can kind of take a look in that area and see if there's anything that can be done or improved.
It would be appreciated. So when we do go back to the post office, with our list, we solidly try to hit as much as we can in the conversation.
Yeah. Outside of that, like everyone said, this is kind of an effort just to get as much as we can. Might be futile in the end, but at least we can try to get as much as we possibly can for the residents. So I support this, but we just have to keep pushing as staff has done already.
All right, thank you, Matt. Dawn?
Yeah, not sure what I can say, other than I agree with the last commissioners to do the best we can for the residents, but not sure what else I can say.
Great. Okay. Alderman Lorik.
No questions, just a quick comment. Thank all the residents for their input. Thanks to Doug for the very thorough presentation. And thanks for continuing to push to get, the best landscaping plan that we can get given the circumstances. And just to clarify, Doug, on the presentation that you gave, is everything that you were suggesting in the presentation, are those all the conditions in the suggested motion?
Well, they are in some way, shape, or form, yes. But what I would suggest, quite frankly, to this commission is that it's probably not a great optically that someone from USPS is not here, A, to hear these concerns, and B, to answer your questions. And I do not and will not represent them with respect to this plan. So if it were up to me, if I was a member voting on this commission, what your role is, quite honestly, whether you approve it or not, probably is of little consequence, because they will, as they have demonstrated time and time again, forge ahead with what they want to do. But I think we should make the request again to have them present to answer your questions. I would not endorse this plan.
Okay, thank you. That's kind of what I was getting at. If we're trying to concur with all those, all the conditions, or if we're just gonna be able to vote to not concur at all. So that kind of answered it for me. So thank you.
Mr. Mayor, this is Carrie. There was a question that was entered into the Q&A chat, and that is, what is the purpose of the gate on the southeast corner of the fencing currently in place? It was from Rachel, who is a neighbor who has spoken previously.
Okay. Southeast gate. That would be near the railroad tracks, correct?
Southeast.
Oh no, southeast would be.
Yeah, I'm not even going to attempt to speak on the behalf of the
I don't have an answer for you either, Rachel. Sorry, that's near your place. I don't know.
Yeah, it might be for maintenance. of the landscaping, hopefully.
Yeah, be the only thing I could think of also.
Mayor, while we're out there, we'll take a look at the gate and see what size it is and make an interpretation on what it could be used for.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Greg, is there anything more?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Chris?
Well, I would actually motion to hold this, so we had time, if that was the appropriate motion to make, to have them come back and be part of the dialogue here, because, you know, we're looking at a plan that was promised to, you know, X amount of years ago. We barely can get commitment for what they want to do now. We have a lot of residents in that neighborhood, and I have a daughter and son-in-law that live there as well. They're all impacted by this day in and day out. And so for, you know, at a minimum, we could ask, you know, respectfully that they come and talk to us and ask them how they can just mitigate some of these things. The biggest note to that I took away from this was noise. The berms, there's a lot of berms that have fences on them, but there's no decorations or plantings around any of them, you know, and then just the noise and all in general. So how loud is it going to be for these people? The other thing is you know, that barrier, the sound barrier wall that we were talking about earlier on, you know, and coming out of those loading gate docks, you know, I really think that these neighbors need to, if there's any way we could ask them to do something about this, the sound on that end there, that it would be something worth doing. So that's just my 2 cents, guys.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Yeah, it's it's a mess, to say the least. Fred?
Yeah, I've had a couple of concerns. One of them is the stormwater, especially the post office itself. It appears that some of that could drain down into the residential area on the east side. And I think there needs to be some more work done on that. Plus, I think we still have a lot of questions that the residents have about the landscaping and so forth. So I kind of with Chris that maybe we want to put this on hold a little bit, trying to get a little more detailed so we can answer the questions that have been asked. That's it.
Mr. Mayor, there was another question that was entered into the Q&A chat.
Yep, I just read it, Carrie, and you know, it came from Kristen, and she asked, will the neighbors know what the answers are when we talk to them, meaning the U.S. Postal Service, or how do they find out? If we can get that conversation going, we'd get a report, not a report, but we would either call a short meeting with the neighborhood or get a letter out explaining what we found in reference to our questions, and communicate with you that way. So, and I got another one. Russell says the drainage along Poplar does not drain anywhere. So, yeah, obviously Fred brings up a good point. You know, we have a lot of questions for the U.S. Postal Service, and there hasn't been very good answers or communications on their end. We request it. Obviously, you know, they were well aware of the meeting tonight and didn't attend tonight, which isn't a good sign. But we'll continue to pursue them, get the answers we need, and then we'll figure out the best form of communication to the neighborhood there in Chapel Hills. Okay. Fred, is there anything else?
Oh, that covers it.
Okay. Commissioner Chandler?
A lot of my items have been discussed, and there is a concern specifically with the drainage, the barriers, the berms, the trees, landscaping, walls, etc. So I am in agreement with Alderman Guzekowski to possibly put this on hold. And then I have a question specifically for Doug in regards to all these additional items. Is it possible to add it to the list if we decide to place this on hold? And when I say add to the list, being the drainage items, a lot of the landscaping is there, but specifically about replacing those screening walls or replacing those trees that were Oak Creek planted yet removed, etc.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of different moving parts to this development and the obligations. And I wouldn't characterize, I mean, all of the landscaping plan as solving all of those concerns. And, you know, regardless of what the landscaping plan is, there's still obligations, as they have stated. Again, obligation being kind of a loose word because, again, as they've ran us in the past, they're not, we can't force them to do that. But we will, again, take a look at what they've said they're going to do and what they've done, and remind them of their obligations that were made both in writing and in a public setting. And, you know, aside from just having some real frank conversations with our elected officials, I mean, that's the only way they're going to listen. And again, I don't want to put all this on Mr. Ceci because he's been our local contact. He's been very good to work with, but he can only do so much.
Thank you, Doug. Kevin, is that it for the callers as of now?
It appears so, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. I'm not going to rehash a lot of this because I think Doug summed it up really well, and the commissioners came up with the same points as well as the residents. You know, this is nowhere near what Oak Creek standards would be in a normal project with a private entity. We're dealing with the United States Post Office. It's been stated they can come in and they're immune to our standards, and they pretty much took full advantage of this. We did have the agreement in 08. It expired. We're going to continue to pursue them. As Doug said, we're going through Joseph Ceci. He's got his marching orders and he's doing the best he can. But we want to pursue that, from the berms to the walls to the drainage. You know, it's not the fence we want. There's numerous things, and we need a list. What we need is them to at least come to the table. You know, we really, moving on this is nothing more than a statement by the city to say we don't agree with what you're doing. You know, we want you to go back to the 08 plan and do it. We haven't gotten there. I think Doug summed it up best. It's very frustrating as an elected local official when, you know, you work with state officials on road projects, or federal officials for that matter. And there's always a level of cooperation, always between organizations. There's a little bit of disconnect. But this is insane. This is just the government doing really whatever they please. You know, I stated it before, we went out to our Congress people, our senators. You know, the citizens, don't be afraid to call these people. They work for you, just no different than an elected official as myself. You know, we do answer to constituents, and so should they. And, you know, we're doing the best we can where we're at. Don't be afraid to reach out and say, we want some satisfaction on this. Whether it'll help, I don't know, but they should be aware of what's going on, not only from the city, but from the residents. And quite frankly, sometimes residents really carry weight. They really, really do. So I got a question in the chat about, are they not doing this due to budget? I really don't think it's budget concerns. I don't know that for fact, but the building has been scaled down from what it previously was in 08. Everything's basically changed. I think they're just very poor partners in what they want to do.
Mr. Mayor, maybe I can shed some light on that.
Yeah,
And
go ahead.
what appears to me that what has happened is that the post office, the postal service, thought that they could just, again, back in July, this is what we're doing. We're going out, this is what we want to do. We're bid it out. We got the low bidder. Now we got them under contract. And now, oh, you mean we have to do all this stuff? And there's a contract that's out there. And now, I mean, the post office is not willing to readdress that contract to cover all the things that they should have been in the first place. And you know, it's the contractor. A lot of times they'll just say, "Well, that's not us. That's the contractor." Well, you're the owner. You're paying for this under the contract. It's you. So when I think it's just a case where they never even anticipated that they'd have to comply with the 2008 plan. They just kind of, this is what we're building. You can review it if you want, but you're not approving it. This is what we're building. So, but I still, and I applaud the commission for holding them to the statements that they have made at public meetings and in writing that they would commit towards the responsibilities and obligations of the 2008 plans. Again, at the end of the day, is it going to happen? I don't know, but we certainly should remind them of those obligations at every turn.
You're certainly right, Doug. I do agree with you. And again, I don't think they ever had any intentions of going back to the 2008 deal, because when they put out for bid, they put out for bid what we're seeing. They ain't putting out for bid what they had in 2008. But again, you know, the ship kind of sailed at this point in time. The pressure we need is to get them to the table, see if they're going to be an organization that'll keep their word. You know, and again, as we're talking to elected officials above us, state and federal, we need to remind them of what the standards are and what's going on here between our federal government that we support and what we're getting in return. So as locally, I will say, you know, the instruction will be to staff, let's bring the post office in with our list of deficiencies, I'll call it, on the plan and go from there. It's been difficult since they announced that this project was back on from day one. And we didn't have great communication. And I know it sounds like excuses, but the staff really was pounding their head against the wall, trying to get some answers and get some people to the table. It was very difficult. We had people in here from DC, and it's like they took a ride out here for the afternoon to satisfy us and walked away. That was my opinion of that meeting. So, okay. Doug, I do have a list. I'll share it with you tomorrow. I'll be in City Hall tomorrow, and I'm sure staff has a more extensive list than I, and you got the input from the commissioners and the residents. Let's try to get a meeting with them again.
I did, thank you.
Hey, Mayor, can I have a question here, please?
Oh, certainly, go ahead.
My question is to Doug or to everyone here. Was there environmental documentation done for this landscaping and project and seeing what the impact on the resident and neighborhood? Is there a special environmental document that has to be done for such work or no?
Not for the landscaping. Again, I'm not going to speak on behalf of USPS. There was the only point of contact that we had with them up until, you know, at the beginning of this was a wetland fill permit. And I know that there are certainly environmental regulations with respect to federal projects, but that's their thing, what they choose to share with us with respect to that, but not specifically for the landscaping, no.
And this project is 100% funded by the federal, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, again, that's for them to say.
I understand. I'm just, if Matt can maybe explain a little bit what I'm trying to say. You know, I work with the state and we deal a lot with federal and state and that type of work. For our roadway projects, we have to follow the NEPA process regardless of who you are or what agency you work for. So can we follow the NEPA process here?
Yeah, Commissioner Hanna, engineering is not aware if they did or didn't. We never received any documentation in regards to environmental documentation or any impact statements that they might have put together. So that would be a question, I guess, for their local representative.
And this is something that we can hold them accountable because these are federal requirements. This is not just a state or local agency requirement. So that may be a way to find a way to get them to respond.
Possible. Another avenue to try.
All right, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Christine. Okay, do we want to make a motion for the to concur with the 2008 plan?
Hey,
Or
Mayor,
yes, go ahead, Greg.
I just have a quick question. I know that holding it was thrown out as an option, but after your statement that, I mean, the post office can ultimately do what they're going to do, and this is more of a statement. Can we change the motion and just move to not concur and take a vote that way?
To not concur with their current actions?
I
To
think,
not concur with the landscaping plan as submitted.
Alderman Lorik, this is Carrie. I think that we would do, what we would recommend is that you just handle it with any other non-recommendation, which is make the motion in the affirmative and then vote against.
Okay, thank you. And I again, I don't know what the take on the commission is, if people would prefer holding it or just voting against it or for it.
You know, I would, if I may add, I think that you probably have a better chance of at least having an audience with them if you hold it. Because if you just say, no, we're denying it, they're gonna say, okay, that's good, we're moving forward. So I would, again, our goal here is to get the absolute best plan that we can under the circumstances. And I think from my perspective, the best way of doing that is to withhold that, whether it's a positive, whether it's concurring or not. We want to get them in front of this commission and have them explain why they think this is the best plan for the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Sounds like a strategy. How about a motion? Greg, you want to do the motion?
Guzekowski makes a motion to hold the site plan review for the 2201 East College Avenue conditions and restrictions for the USPS.
Seifert seconds.
Just to clarify, it's the landscaping plan?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Anna, no.
And Sullivan, no.
Grillo, no.
Just to clarify, we're
holding
voting to hold it?
Holding.
We're holding.
So Lorik, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
With the clarification of the motion, the voting members who voted nay, do you want to amend your vote?
Yes.
Perillo, yes.
Sullivan, no.
Okay.
Anna, yes.
Okay, so with this, I have Sullivan as a nay and all other commissioners as a yes.
Correct, Carrie. That's what I understood.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll hold it to the residents. We will do our best to get them back to the table and use all avenues and anything at our disposal to get a better plan, as Doug Seymour had said. Communication-wise, when we do have answers of some type, one way or another, we'll come up with a communication means for the neighborhood at Chapel Hills. Communicate what we've learned. So, thank you for your patience. I know you guys, you're in a bad spot. very frustrating. I can only imagine being in that neighborhood. It's frustrating from our end at City Hall, but I can only imagine living there. So we will do our best. Okay, our last item is item 6G, and it's a plan unit development amendment. It's requested by Walden LLC for amendments to the existing PUD affecting the properties at 1920, 1900, 1850, 1848, 1816, 1818, 1750, and 1700 West Drexel, and also 7700 South Akia Way. Carrie, do you have this one?
I do. The reason that there are so many addresses for this is because there is a certified survey map that combined and then redivided this property, but that has not yet been recorded. So we do have to reflect all the addresses. Apologies for the mouthful that you had there, Mr. Mayor. So this request is coming as staff has been working with the applicants and with some developers on Creekside Crossing Marketplace developments. And as we're working with those projects, came to realize that there were a few inconsistencies with the Creekside Crossing conditions and restrictions for the PUD. So we are here tonight to talk about some proposed amendments that would kind of clarify the existing PUD. The current zoning is B6. We're talking about that regional destination marketing, the marketplace for the regional, I'm sorry, getting tongue twisted here. The B6 interchange regional retail district, I'm getting that backwards too. But anyway, we're talking about amending that for the retail mixed use project that is currently undergoing and was approved by the Common Council in January of this year. So the proposed amendments are to basically assign owner responsibility for signs within the public rights of way. This will be coming before the Plan Commission for an overall sign package, kind of talking about the unified development signage. So we're talking about wayfinding here and the entry signs. Clarifying parking lot setback and landscaping requirements. These are for the individual development lots, getting some more clarity on that in terms of setbacks to where we have shared parking arrangements and landscaping. Therefore, one of the concerns is that if we allow for shared parking, that doesn't necessarily meet the interior landscaping requirements. So this is allowing for those shared options and amending the landscaping requirements. Also clarifying that the overall PUD has separate setback requirements for certain circumstances. So if you turn to page 4 of 6, you will note that there is an additional column in the setbacks that's looking at front and public right-of-way setbacks on the exterior perimeter of the land area that's included in the PUD, and also the front and public right-of-way setback interior to the PUD. We have an exterior perimeter requirement, and we also have a requirement for setbacks to the interior public roadway. So we wanted to make sure that that was clear for all of the projects moving forward. Also updating the buffer requirements, and that was one of the points of clarity that was needed in terms of the proposal that will be before the Plan Commission next month regarding where the buffers are required for this particular PUD. And then of course, future inconsistencies between the PUD narrative that was submitted by the applicant and the conditions and restrictions that are ultimately approved by the Common Council. Which of those documents will rule is now clear in the PUD that the conditions and restrictions that were approved by the council would be the regulating portion for any of those. So if you turn to your conditions and restrictions, there are a few highlighted sections on pretty much all of the pages, but if there are any questions about any of those highlights, I would be happy to provide some more clarification on that. What I will note on page 2 of 6 is we already have a development agreement that's been approved, so that is the one change there. And also a master landscaping plan was brought before the Plan Commission earlier this year and approved, so that language has been updated on page 4 of 6 and 3 of 6. What I will note on page 3 of 6 under subsection 4E is the addition of the design, construction, operation, and maintenance of any development signs or streetscaping to be placed within the public right-of-way shall be the responsibility of the adjacent property owner, their successors, and assigns. That is some of the clarifying language that's being proposed here. And additionally, under section 5, you will note that there are some clarifications in terms of the parking requirements that are mentioned on the screen as well. Buffer yards are located in section 8, clarifying when those are required for developments within the PUD. And then finally, under page 5, section 10, that other regulations and inconsistency language has been updated. So if there are no concerns and the Plan Commission is satisfied with the proposed amendments, there is a suggested motion for approval on the screen. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Do we have anybody from Walden that would like to address the commission? Kevin?
We have Kevin Kennedy, member owner. And
Okay.
Kevin, you should be able to speak.
Would Kevin like to speak, or is he just here for questions? Kevin?
Yes, hello. Good evening. I'm here just to answer any questions if any popped up.
Okay, thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
We'll go to the commission. Commissioner Chandler?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Siebert?
No questions.
Alderman Guzekowski?
No questions, sir. Thank you.
Alderman Lorik?
A quick question on section 8 buffer yards. It distinguishes park districts and residential districts. I know there's still that residential area in there, but is there a park district in that that abuts that development somewhere?
There are 2 potential areas where the park district buffer would come into play. There's park across the street, but that wouldn't necessarily affect any of the development per se, because it's already across Drexel Avenue and we have within a certain distance. So that wouldn't apply there. But for the rest of the area that is north of Drexel Avenue and kind of northwest of IKEA Way, there is still parkland there, and then there's parkland north of the IKEA site itself. So that's more for if there are any future developments that would expand the PUD perhaps, but there's nothing immediately adjacent in terms of park districts for the PUD as it currently is configured.
Okay. And as far as the residential area that is there, that still falls under the exterior perimeter setbacks, correct? Where it'd be 20 feet from a structure. I mean, there's still setback requirements around that residential property, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Greg. Dawn?
No questions.
Matt?
I have some questions of clarification, I guess, if Carrie could help me out here. And that would be in our section 4E, the ones that we have discussed between our 2 departments. When we have any development signs, I believe that's our wayfinding signs. As far as streetscaping, what does that include?
The streetscaping would include the master landscape plan that has the landscape elements approved by the Plan Commission within the right-of-way.
So are we talking the stone planters, the benches, things along those lines?
That would be my interpretation of this section of the code, and if Director Seymour has a different interpretation, I would invite that he give some clarification on that.
I concur.
Okay. So how, when we talk about maintenance on these signs and the responsibility of the adjacent property owner, so I want clarification for the commission on the development sign or the entry sign. Say it be next to the hotel and it starts falling apart, they have to maintain that. Now, if we have a wayfinding sign down, I don't know, 200-300 feet down in front of a different property and they have to maintain a different sign, are we going to have some form of, you know, I guess, comfort level that all these signs are going to be maintained the same way in the same fashion? Or is this, or would it be better if there was some form of a
MOU with the city?
business,
Okay.
something along the lines where we have some kind of, you know, on paper or something more than just, yeah, the adjacent property owner is going to do it, because we know how one neighbor does one part of landscaping and another neighbor does another. I guess that's just a concern on our end.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And maybe if I can add my perspective to that. I mean, I think that the mechanism for doing that can take many forms and may include some type of district-wide maintenance. And certainly with Walden being the majority property owner and most of this, and anticipate will remain the property owner, I have few concerns that will be maintained to a level that is satisfactory to the city. But this ultimately, I mean, if all those things fail, I mean, the only people that we can go back against are the adjacent property owners. And that's really why the language is crafted in that manner. If there's a mechanism, and I'm sure there is, to that's agreeable to both parties to assign maintenance responsibilities in the development agreement to a owners association or what have you, I'm absolutely fine with that. But ultimately, I mean, if all else fails, we can go back to the property owners adjacent to it.
Okay, thank you, Doug. That's all I have.
Okay. Christine?
Nothing here, thanks.
Okay. Matt kind of hit on my main question, and it was in section 4E as well, about the maintenance going forward, particularly on the streetscape. He brought up a good point on the signs, but if there's going to be boulevards in there, stone planters, whatever they're going to have, maintenance, planting, weeding, all that, that's going to fall on the property owners.
There is a master landscape plan that has been approved, and that would be something that all of the landowners would be held to maintaining. Obviously, until the land is sold, it would be partially the responsibility of Walden as the landowner. Typically what we've seen, and I'm not sure if this is going to be the case in Creekside Crossing, but typically we've seen some of these maintenance responsibilities at least referenced in the deed restrictions. Whether that be referencing the development agreement, or if there is an owners association or a bid or what have you, there is that possibility as well. The option, of course, would be something that we would talk to the applicant about.
Okay, because I know I referenced the same thing in the master landscape plan, and the answer was they were going to take care of it, which is great. Again, just want to make sure that it meets city standards and is done in a timely fashion. I mean, this is going to be a premier destination in Oak Creek. We want it to look its best at all times. So, other than that, I think all my questions were answered. Greg got the setbacks on me, and I think we're good. So, any further comments or questions? Okay, hearing none. Motion on 6G, please.
Lorick moves that the commission recommend that the common council approves the amendments to the existing planned unit development for the properties at 1920, 1900, 1850, 1848, 1816, 1800, 1750, and 1700 West Drexel Avenue, and 7700 South Ikea Way after a public hearing.
Guzekowski, a second.
Roll call.
Anna, aye.
Sullivan, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Lorick, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Okay. That'll get us to adjournment. Before we adjourn, Dawn, we're getting in the home stretch of the farmers market. Anything new and exciting there?
We still have 4 weeks to go. So, and everything is in season, all the fall things. So even there's mum plants and pumpkins and everything like that. So.
Excellent. And you start at 9 o'clock?
9 to 1.
9 to 1. Okay. Again, I'd like to thank the staff. It's a long meeting. Postal Service has been a handful. Staff did a really commendable job, and they have been really working hard to try to get them to the table. But again, everything from the mega marts, you guys are always so well prepared. You do make it easier, particularly on me to run a meeting. I appreciate that. Kevin, great job with the IT as usual. And just to remind everybody, the governor did extend a mask mandate in the city, so nothing's really changed there. That's actually statewide. Again, please, when out in public, abide by the rules, and let's knock our numbers down so we can get back to normal as soon as possible. You know, for your own safety and others, please abide by the mandate. Appreciate that. So with that, adjournment, please.
Carrillo moves to adjourn at 8:16.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Hannah, I.
Sullivan, aye.
Carrillo, I.
Lorik, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, I.
Great. Thank you, commissioners. Appreciate it. I know a little long tonight. Again, first day of autumn, so it's getting darker. You're going to be coming to the meetings in the dark soon enough and going home in the dark. So enjoy the fall, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
See ya.